Buongiorno. With your permission, I will now switch my presentation to English. And it's great to be here in Verona and to be the first English-speaking presenter. There's a lot of pressure, of course, but I think I'm up for the challenge. The topic that I like to speak to you about is this one, beyond the wall of our imagination. As a way of getting started, I would like to ask you a question. I think when we say the expression beyond the wall, all of us immediately form a mental picture. So based on your mental picture, whatever image is formed in your mind, would you rather be inside the wall or outside the wall? Within or beyond? One or the other. So all of us who would rather be inside the wall, raise your hand. Very interesting. Remember, it's one or the other. So all of you that want to be outside the wall, raise your hand. Wow. Many more want to be outside, perhaps inspired by the theme of this very conference. But in reality, the answer is not that simple, not that straightforward, because a wall represents a fundamental contradiction in human nature. On one hand, we need security, safety, comfort, and control, and that is represented by the space within the wall. On the other hand, we have this natural curiosity, a drive to explore and to discover, and that's all the space outside the wall. So then which one should it be? Do we have to choose? Is it one or the other? Or can we have both? Well, I think one thing we can say for sure is that the territory outside a wall is always greater than the one within. So if you limit your thinking to your comfort zone within a wall, then you're missing out on great opportunities and you're not giving expression to your natural urge to discover and to explore. And my proposition to you is that you can and should have both. Yes, you should start out from within a wall. That's your comfort zone. That's your safety zone. But don't look at it as a limitation. Rather, look at it as your foundation, as your point of departure, so that you can always go beyond the wall to explore and discover. And when you do that, what happens? You're naturally expanding the boundaries within the wall. Your comfort area grows. Thank you. Let me now give you a scenario of the dynamics around the wall. Imagine with me. So inside the wall, let's say that there is an artist, a performer who invents a whole new form of live entertainment that has to do with holding a color ball behind his back. And this show, this live performance becomes a sensation. People are lining up to see the performance. He becomes an instant celebrity, one of the most famous people within the wall. He has a monopoly on the business built around the performance. So life is good for this artist. But very importantly, he limits his vision and his scope of activities to within the wall. He's content with that. So what happens next? Eventually, word of this performance goes outside the wall. And other artists outside with similar resources and talents will mimic the same performance. And notice that these other artists outside the wall also started within their own walls, within a small space, but they had the vision and the courage to look at a global market space. As soon as this happens, the relative importance of the inventor inside the wall greatly diminishes. He becomes nothing more than a marginal, a peripheral player. What happens next? Well, over time, because of changing lifestyles, changing tastes, or competition, the entire market shifts. All of a sudden, what the public wants to see is which one of these artists can correctly guess the color of the ball that he's holding behind his back. And whoever does that first will win the attention, the affection, the loyalty, and the following of everyone around the globe. So this is an absolute game changer. Think about this for a moment. All of the artists know that there are 4 players, that there are altogether 2 red and 2 blue balls that they all have. And they can see what's in front of them. They can see the color that is being held by other players. So in this transformed marketplace, who is going to prevail? Well, we can see that the originator of the game inside the wall has no chance. He is in the worst possible position. He has no market information. Therefore, he becomes obsolete. Outside the wall, the one closest is in a similar position. So he is not equipped to respond or to lead a transformed market. So there's only 2 possibilities, the one furthest from the wall and the one in the middle. Conventional logic would think that the one furthest from the wall would be the one to prevail because he has a dominant market position. He has the best view of everybody else. But in reality, it's not him. It's the middle player outside the wall who will prevail, because he's the one that uses unconventional logic, parallel thinking. He dips into his creativity to make sense of a transformed marketplace and be its leader. How many of you see why it is that the middle person is the one, the middle player is the one that can correctly guess the color of the ball that he's holding? A few. I'm not going to tell you the answer. I'm not going to tell you why or how he's the one. I'd like you to think about it for the rest of the day as a way of stretching your imagination. And I'll be around, so come up to me during the breaks and share with me your thinking, or maybe we'll post the answer on the event website so you can visit it later. But note the progression here. We have a creative person who invents something that is very well received. He becomes first marginalized and then he's made obsolete because he sets his vision too narrowly. He puts up artificial boundaries within which he should play. And in the transforming marketplace, the global marketplace, it is not the player who has the best strategic position, the most resources, that will be the market leader, but the one who can use his imagination the best. Therefore, the question becomes, let me just make sure, yes, here we go. How do we go beyond the boundaries of our imagination? How do we go beyond that wall and make full use of our imagination? And I would like to propose to you 3 mental action steps that if you consider, you can continuously venture out, tap into your imagination, and increase your comfort zone in the process. And in order to illustrate them for you, I would like to rely on the help of Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss is an American, or was an American, writer and illustrator of children's books who had this deep understanding of both the joy and the power of fully engaging our imagination, which he brought to us through his stories. You can see from one of his most famous quotes, his perspective. Why fit in when you were made to stand out? Why limit yourself to within a wall when you can be outside exploring? So I like to use 2 of his stories and then the example of Dr. Seuss himself to illustrate these 3 action points. First one is the story of the Sneetches. Now, Sneetches are these magical creatures, and in their society, there are 2 major groups. Sneetches with green stars on their stomach, and Sneetches with plain stomachs, with nothing on them. And there's nothing more in the world that the Sneetches, without anything on their stomach, want than to have a star themselves. But of course, this is impossible. It's never been done until this high energy and enterprising monkey called McBean comes to town with this crazy machine. And when the Sneetches pay money and go through the machine, magically, a star gets put on their stomach. So all these Sneetches line up, go through the machine, they come out with a star, they're elated, they're overjoyed. Seeing this, the other group, which had stars, still want to be different, so they want theirs removed. So they pay their money, they go through the machine, and they get theirs taken off. Now the original group that didn't have stars think, well, maybe that's better. Maybe that's what we want as well. And so they go through the machine again, get theirs taken off. And this cycle continues over and over until the Sneetches spend all their money and McBean leaves town a very rich monkey. There's many different interpretations of this story, many different levels, but the one I like best is this. No matter what you do, whether you are in business, whether you're in politics, in education, or even in personal relationships, the experience of your target audience with you naturally has points that cause the most frustration, dissatisfaction, that your audience would most like to have removed or transformed. But most of us think that those points are not removable, that they're undesirable but necessary part of the experience. So what you have the ability to do is look at your target audience, use your imagination to identify those, what I call pain points, the points that cause the most frustration and dissatisfaction. And when you do, it unlocks this tremendous positive emotional energy towards you. And notice how I phrased this. Pain points are to be identified, and you can turn them not into points of satisfaction, but infatuation. And infatuation means what? That it's very strong, but temporary. Just like with the Sneetches. As soon as they got the stars on their stomach, now they wanted something else. They forgot how painful that was, and now they want the opposite. And it's true with every experience, every target audience that you have, that once we have what we want something else, which gives us a natural platform to always use our imagination and venture beyond and deliver to our target audience what they think they want most. The second story is about the Zacks. Now, Zacks are altogether different, but of course also fantastical creatures, and they have two main characteristics. Number one, they're very stubborn, so they're not flexible in their thinking at all. Number two, they can only go in one direction. So the story here is about two Zacks, one north going, one south going, who happen to meet in the middle of a desert, perfectly in each other's way. And because they are stubborn, they did not want to move first. So there they stood, facing each other, nose to nose, foot to foot, and neither refused to move. And then the story goes on, and predictably, this is what happens. The world does not wait for them to resolve their differences. They don't care. People and society doesn't care. So as you can see here, quoting Dr. Seuss, and they built a city right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there standing unbudged in their tracks. So what's the message here? What's the second action point? Is that you should always re-examine, redefine, and stretch the definition of what it is that you do. So don't focus on your competitors. Don't just try to outduel them, to be better than them, but always look around, all around you, and look at how you can continue to be relevant, how you can continue to stay close and remain indispensable to your target audience. And the third action point is through the example of Dr. Seuss himself. Now, Dr. Seuss, whose real name was Theodore Geisel, wrote his books in the 1950s, and his primary target audience were children learning to read, so between ages 5 and 8. And at that time, in the US, there were two principal types of books for this age group. One were called early readers, and these were government-approved books which could only contain about 200 approved words for children because they were simple words, the idea being that they needed repetition to learn how to read. But what happened? Because they were so simple and controlled, they were boring. So they didn't inspire children and therefore didn't help them learn how to read. The other group were fairy tales. So Hans Christian Andersen, Grimm brothers. These were wonderful stories, but they were too complex. So children couldn't read it themselves. It was usually read to them by parents. So again, it didn't help them to learn to read. So what did Dr. Seuss do? What was his innovation? He combined the best of both. His stories only use the same simple words that were approved by early readers, but he infused them with fun, adventurous, imaginative stories, bringing in his wild illustrations and funny sense of humor and creatures that he invented. So all of a sudden, he created these timeless masterpieces that both children and adults alike adore. And of course, it greatly helped and still is helping children learn how to read. So the point there is, and the third component is here. Instead of inventing something outright, when you venture outside the wall and make use of your imagination, there's a wonderful opportunity. Because all you have to do is simply unlock powerful new combinations of already existing components. What this means that your entire world, your environment, your surroundings is your playground, is your laboratory. So you just need to find those pieces that you can put together and create something exceptional that no one has ever thought of because they're enclosed in their own walls of thinking. And the previous video in terms of creating that power generator in Africa was a perfect illustration of this. All the scraps that he found and made something that has incredible value. And that's available to you if you venture outside the wall. So in closing, I would like to leave you with a call to action. And fittingly, it is based on a drawing on a wall by street illustrator David Zinn, and here's the message. Occupy your imagination, or someone else will. What does this mean? That you have this wonderful resource, your imagination. Take full use of it. Pursue your sense of discovery, your sense of adventure, your sense of curiosity. Because if you don't, you're surrendering territory, and someone else will take that space from you. Thank you very much.